after interaction, we begin to see that Jesus is not in the middle of his story as we read this here. He is coming to the end of his story, quickly nearing its end, which is where we pick up our text today. Our text today kind of serves as a bit of a catch your breath for just a second before we hit the final sprint. And it's going to be a beautiful one for us to look at by the time we get to the end of it. But before we get to the end, we've got to get to this kind of scene reset from Luke. So Luke 18, verse 31. Then he took the 12 aside and he told them, "See, we are going up to Jerusalem. Everything that is written through the prophets about the Son of Man will be accomplished. For he will be handed over to the Gentiles. He will be mocked, insulted, spit on, and after they flog him, they will kill him. And he will rise on the third day." So Jesus has had this, we'll stop there for just a second. Jesus has had this extended time of teaching and has kind of challenged the rich young man, and he's kind of laid out a few different things, kind of pushed back and forth on a few different things. But here he turns away from the crowd, looks at his disciples, and he says, "All right, guys, I need you to know something. Here's the way things are about to go down. Things are about to get very real here. It's going to mean something very different, that you are one of my followers. Things are about to change." He's not talking to the big crowd anymore. He's talking to his disciples, to the 12 that are right there with him, that are his inner circle. So he turns to them and he says, things are about to get very hard. It's a heavy moment that Jesus delivers for his disciples. I think that's lost on us because this is something of a transition point in Luke's gospel. He doesn't dwell on it. He doesn't give us a whole lot of information about how the disciples respond, but this has to be a very heavy moment for them whenever he delivers this news. And it serves us well in this sermon series, much the way it kind of serves the disciples here. It's this deep breath, kind of like Jesus saying, "And here we go." It's the pause before the sprint to the end of the gospel. But for Jesus, it's the pause to kind of reset and recalibrate the expectations for his disciples. So far, they have followed him around. They have been kind of itinerant ministers all throughout the countryside. They have witnessed the most amazing things this world has ever seen. They have confessed and acknowledged that Jesus is the Messiah, the long-awaited one, the one is supposed to come and be the Redeemer of Israel. But their expectations of what that means, what a Messiah was supposed to do, have remained largely the same for them. Now, don't get me wrong, he has kind of refined and kind of reshaped some things, but for the most part, the big picture, these disciples still see Jesus as the Messiah that they had heard and that they had been promised for so long. They still see him as the one to overthrow the oppression of Rome, to come and set things right politically in their day and age. And so they haven't really changed a whole lot about what they expected to get. They've had the front row seat and seen what Jesus has done. No doubt their mind has been blown, but they haven't fundamentally shifted anything. And here Jesus is telling them, y'all need to prepare your hearts and your minds for what's about to go down, because you are not ready for what's about to happen. Now, before we get too far into the rest of this message and before we really press too much into all of this, I think we need to consider exactly what's going on here for ourselves. And I just kind of want to collectively offer a challenge to all of us this morning. And this may be the main application that you take out of all of these texts this morning. So I want to push you on this. We too need to hear Jesus' words here. We too need to recalibrate our own hearts and our own minds to who Jesus actually is. Not the one that we think he should be, not the one that we've even been told our whole lives that he might be, not the one that we've fashioned in our minds that this is the way Jesus works, but the one that actually comes out of the pages of Scripture, the one that is in the Gospels. We need to let Jesus lead. We sing this song, "He leadeth me." He goes before me. He takes my hand and he leads me. We need to make sure that's actually Jesus that is leading us, not some invention of our own hearts and our own minds. The longer I watch social media and listen to people talk about what it means to be a Christian, especially when they attach that label Christian to our politics, the more often I find myself asking the question, what Jesus are they following? Because it's not the one here in this Bible. It's not the one that I am reading about in the Gospel of Luke. And that's the challenge Jesus is giving to his disciples. And it is a potent one for us this morning, right off the top. We cannot say this is who Jesus is and then define him in our own image according to our own desires. Let's read this. I just want to read this again. I want you to hear what it is that Jesus says. And remember that almost everything Jesus says is about to happen. They had no category for that happening to their Messiah. 31. He took the 12 aside and told them, see, we're going up to Jerusalem. Check, that makes sense. Everything that is written through the prophets about the Son of Man will be accomplished. Check, that makes sense. They're like, all right, let's roll. Let's do this. I'm ready. Let's do it. For he will be handed over to the Gentiles. Okay, hang on. He will be mocked, insulted, spit on. That was not in the cards. And after they flog him, they will kill him. That definitely was not what they thought was going to happen. And then he will rise on the third day. So Jesus is standing on the road. They're moving on from this teaching and this ministry that they've been doing. Jesus, I imagine he's like standing like on the road, and he looks down this road, just goes as far as you can see, this dirt path. And he says, hey guys, that road goes to Jerusalem. We're about to walk that road until we get there. We got a couple of towns we got to go through before we get there. But if you follow that road, you see that street sign, it says Jerusalem this way. That is where we are going. And then he says, when we get there, guys, it's all going to go down. It's all going to happen. And I can imagine they start looking at each other and they kind of get a bounce in their step, a bit like a football team whenever they're in the locker room before they're ready to go out and play. They can hear the band and they can hear the crowd out there. They're ready to go out and play their game. And the coach is giving them this rally speech. They're kind of getting a bounce in their step like, all right, this is what we've been waiting on, Jesus. This is what it is. Been doing all this practice up until now, but now it's game day. Let's go. I'm ready. Like I can just see Peter like over to the side. He's like got the eye black on and he's like, all right, I'm down. This is what I've been waiting on. Let's go, Jesus. I got my sword right here. Anybody comes at you, I'm taking his ear off. I'll tell you that right now. Let's go. I'm ready to do this. I am ready to fight. It's time. And then Jesus says, I'll be handed over, mocked, insulted, spit on, flogged, and killed. My guess is they didn't even hear him say that he would rise on the third day. Like they're so taken aback by the fact that he's going to be flogged and killed. I almost wonder if they didn't even hear that part. Like, hang on, whoa. What? Rise on the third day? Okay, that sounds cool. What do you mean you're going to be killed, Jesus? You said you're going to do what the prophets have always said. This is not what we've been told the prophets have always said. What we've been told is that the prophets have said that you're going to overthrow oppression, and that's what we signed up for, Jesus. I think he lost them at flogged and killed. That's not the Messiah that they thought they were following. Now, he's told them multiple other times that he was going to be killed and raised again on the third day. And every time they're like, I must have misunderstood. He must have misspoke. Like they always kind of excuse it, dismiss it, and then like Luke just kind of moves on in the narrative. Like, yeah, he told them, but they didn't get it. That's not the Jesus that they thought they had witnessed over the course of the last 3 years. The one they had witnessed had done amazing things. He had shown all this power. He had walked on water. He had brought men back to life. He had done amazing things. What's he talking about? He's going to be flogged and killed. That's not the Jesus they thought they knew. It's not the prophecies they'd been told. They had a different person in mind. It was just so confusing to them that even Luke notes just how much they didn't get it. So Luke 18:34. It says, they understood none of these things. The meaning of the saying was hidden from them, and they did not grasp what was said. They just didn't get it. When Jesus said he was going to die, that did not compute for them. They couldn't make that fit in their preconceived categories of what the Messiah was supposed to be. It was so radically different than their expectations. This is not how it was supposed to happen at all. I imagine many of them were asking themselves, what have we signed up for here? What have we gotten ourselves into here? What in the world is going on? And who is this guy we thought we knew? What are we doing? Andrew Peterson has a song. I've told you all about this song before. I listen to it every year before on the first day of school when I drop my kids off. It's all about watching your kids grow up and praying that they would stay lashed to the cross as they grow and as they get older and as they go through life's difficulties. And there's a verse in there. And if I'm not already crying by this point, this verse usually pulls the tears right out of me. And there's a verse, and he says, I know you'll be scared when you take up that cross. And I know it'll hurt because I know what it costs. Jesus knew what was coming. His disciples did not. Jesus had told them to count the cost of following him, but I'm not sure that they had looked very closely at the invoice that they had gotten whenever they signed up to be one of his followers. I think they thought, yeah, count the cost. I get it. We're going to war. We're going to be soldiers. A few people will die. It'll be fine. But I'll be at his right hand. He'll be, my brother will be at his left hand. We'll be up there. This will be great. All will be well. I don't think they had counted the cost very well at all. And so my question that I have for you is, what about you? Have you counted the cost? Have you had those moments like these disciples when you were following Jesus and you had to ask the question, is this worth it? Is this worth it? What have I gotten myself into? What have I gotten my family into? What am I doing here? If you've not had a moment like that, then based on Jesus' words throughout the Gospels, I'd say you may not be following Jesus at all. But you might just be following something of your own creation that you call Jesus. Those type of questions should be the norm of the Christian life. It should be part of the rhythm of following Jesus. Asking the question, what have I gotten myself into? What has Jesus gotten me into? What is this going to cost me, and is it worth it? I think this is part of what it means to take up your cross daily and to die to yourself, to ask the question, is it worth it? And then to come back with the response of, yeah, this is what I'm in for. This is what I signed up for. I gave Jesus my yes, a blank check, and he says, all right, here's where I need you. And you say, I'll go. But at some point, you should have to step back and say, oh man, this cost me more than I thought it was going to cost me. And if following Jesus is not costing you anything, you're probably not following Jesus. It says here that the meaning of what Jesus told them was hidden to them. Now, most commentators, whenever you read that, will assume that this means that God or the Holy Spirit has hidden it from them so that they can't know what is going on there. And that's very, very possible, maybe even probable that is the meaning there. But we're not actually told that that is what is going on there. I wonder if what has hidden the meaning of what Jesus said there, I wonder if what has hidden the meaning is not just their own expectations, their own ideas, their own agendas. And those things are what have blinded them to the truth of what Jesus has laid out there. It was hidden from them because they didn't want to see it. They didn't want to hear what Jesus had to say. Because their expectations said they were going to reign with Jesus in this world, in this kingdom. And Jesus says, no, you're going to die with me in this world, in this kingdom. And I just wonder if they were like, I don't need to hear that, Jesus. I'd rather focus on this version of my life. I can't hear that, Jesus. That's too hard. It's going to cost me too much. It's going to cost my family too much. I can't hear that. I wonder if that's why the meaning of what Jesus said is what was hidden. Jesus is supposed to fit in my box. He's supposed to bless my life. He's supposed to sign off on my plans. He's supposed to be there for my comfort. It can't be that He's asking me to give up on all of those things. That's the whole reason I signed up to be with Jesus. So that I could get all the things I want with a little Jesus dust on top of it. And say that God blessed all of the things I wanted in the first place. Jesus is supposed to fit in our box, and He's supposed to bless the version of our lives that we prefer, but He almost never does. And quite often He asks things of me, of us, that I had no plans of ever giving away. Regardless of what it was that hid the meaning from these disciples, what we know is the disciples didn't get it. They didn't get it at all. These men who spent every day with Jesus, these men who had the front row seat with Jesus, these men that heard the greatest teacher that ever walked the earth, these men that were with Him all the time, they didn't get exactly what Jesus was saying. But Luke is going to give us a story that stands in stark contrast to these disciples. So let's look at this, what I am 100% convinced is a strategically placed story to stand in contrast to the blindness of the disciples. Verse 35. So he walks down the road that he was talking about to the disciples, saying this road goes to Jerusalem, and this road takes them through Jericho. And he says, as he approached Jericho, a blind man was sitting by the road begging. Hearing a crowd passing by, he inquired what was happening. And they said, Jesus of Nazareth is passing by, they told him. So he called out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And then those in front of him told him to keep quiet. But he kept crying out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus stopped and commanded that he be brought to him. And when he came closer, he asked him, what do you want me to do for you? Lord, he said, I want to see. Receive your sight, Jesus told him. Your faith has saved you. And instantly he could see, and he began to follow him, glorifying God. And all the people, when they saw it, gave praise to God. Now this story stands on its own merits. It's a beautiful story. Just to read it on its own. This man hears that Jesus is coming to town, and as the crowd starts to make its way to the city gate, begins to make its way out to where Jesus would be coming through, he knows that now is the time. He knows that this man is coming. How did he know? I don't know if word had gotten around that Jesus was on his way. I don't know if there was kind of like an advance team that came forward saying, hey, Jesus is coming through here, clear the way. I don't know how he knew Jesus was coming, nor do I know how he knew that Jesus coming to town would be a very big deal. I mean, after all, we know from this time period of history, there's no doubt been other false prophets that have come and gone, that have brought their own entourage, that have showed up and made a scene. They had no doubt come through Jericho at some point, since it would be on the way as pilgrims heading to Jerusalem. No doubt this man was familiar with those type of people walking the path, and yet here he sits still blind. Perhaps this man had heard about Jesus, about how he stood in the synagogue in his home in his hometown in Nazareth, in Jesus' hometown. And he said that the long repeated prophecy from the scroll of Isaiah, that the blind would see, that the lame would walk, that the captives would be set free, and that this would be the year of the Lord's favor. and that Jesus would be the man that could bring all of these things. Maybe he had heard about what Jesus had done out in the countryside and on these other towns, about how he had cured others of leprosy, about the man who had the demons cast out of him, about the healings that he did when he went from town to town, about how he wasn't afraid to reach out to the outcast and those that had been forgotten by the rest of society. We don't know how this man believed that Jesus could heal his eyes, but what we do know is this: he did believe. He absolutely believed. He knew something that others had not figured out. And when the entourage began to make its way into town, he wasn't going to miss his chance. He wasn't going to miss this man walking in his midst. He was passing through, and he may never pass through there again. And we know that he never would pass through there again. He wasn't going to miss Jesus. So when Jesus shows up, he knows what he needs to do, and he starts to call out for him. It's undignified. People don't want to hear it. They tell him to shut his mouth, to quit yelling. They're trying to have a nice little pathway for him and for his entourage. This is not becoming of someone, especially someone that nobody wants to hear from in the first place. He's told in no uncertain terms to sit down and be quiet. And he says, oh yeah? Well, here it comes again, and I'm going to say it even louder this time. You're not going to stop me. Why? Because he believes that Jesus can do this. He knows that Jesus can do this, and he is not going to miss his chance. There's something about desperation that changes a person's psyche. It changes their heart. It focuses the mind. It focuses the heart on what really matters. Desperation has a way of pushing aside all the things that don't really matter. All the things that we spend most of our time worried about. All the things that we spend most of our time thinking about. Desperation has a way of clarifying what is most important in this world. And this man was desperate. This man didn't have his sight, but he had something more important than that. He had desperation. Now, I know that's not how we typically think about desperation, right? We don't typically think of that as an asset to be desperate. We think of being desperate as a liability. We say, oh, no. Like, he's just going on a date with that girl because he's desperate. Like, he just wants to go out and be with somebody and be around somebody. He's just doing this or pursuing this or going down this road, just taking this job because he's desperate. And what it means is that you are settling for something less because you just need something. That is not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is a man who realizes he has one hope, he has one way to get his sight back, and it is this man Jesus, and nothing else matters. He can't see the looks that people are giving him anyway, so what does it matter? He's just going to cry out for Jesus. He doesn't offer Jesus anything because he has nothing to offer. He has nothing to bring him. He simply cries out and prays that Jesus might have mercy on him. This man knew he needed something, and it was something he could not provide for himself. And he cries out, Son of David, which shows us that he wasn't just looking for a handout. That is a theological title given to Jesus that indicates this man knew that Jesus was the Messiah, that he was part of the line that was to come from David, that would be the once and then future king, the promised lineage of David. And so he keeps crying out, and they keep shushing him, and he keeps crying out. And Jesus, who had just told his disciples about how he was on his way to die, is not distracted by what awaits him in Jerusalem. He is not weighed down by the weight of each step that gets heavier and heavier on the way to Jerusalem. He's not distracted. He's not moved on. He's not elsewhere. He is ready and looking to give compassion. And so he does. He leans over and he tells them, hey, bring him to me. This guy's crying out. This guy is desperate. I'm the only one that can help him. Bring him to me. So he leans over and he asks the man, all right, you've gotten my attention. Now what is it that you want? And the man says, I want to see. Simple. He knew exactly how to answer that question. For years, he'd thought about nothing but how to answer that question. He wanted to see. I can't help, though, but be struck by the juxtaposition of these two stories. You have this blind man, in his desperation, knows exactly what he needs and is determined to get to Jesus that he might see. He's not distracted by anything. He will not be deterred by anything or anyone. He knows exactly what he needs. And then you have the disciples, distracted, burdened, confused, who cannot see what it is that Jesus is talking about. You have the man who is physically blind, and then you have these disciples that for all intents and purposes seem to be completely blind to the reality of who Jesus is as the Messiah. Now they've confessed him as the Messiah, so I suppose they're not completely blind to that reality, but they are certainly blind to what that means. They're blind to the cost that is in front of them. They're blind to what is about to happen. You have a man who cannot see his hand in front of his face, but he can see clearly what needs to happen. And you have the disciples who have no physical infirmities, but it says the truth is hidden from them. They can't see it. They literally can't see it. And Luke has put these two next to each other to teach us this morning. The disciples don't even realize that they too should be asking Jesus that they might see. All of their world is centered around going to Jerusalem for purposes they do not understand. They aren't yet desperate. We know soon enough that they will be. And we know that they will not handle it nearly as well as what this blind man has. Because their hearts were not prepared for what they needed to ask Jesus. It's one of the great ironies of our faith. It's one of the great difficulties of our faith, frankly. Scripturally speaking, it is the ones who don't have, fill in the blank there, who don't have something. But we'll just say it's the ones who don't have that are the most desperate to see, receive, and hear Jesus. Those that believe they have all they need will never see Jesus. Those that have their sight, I mean, think about this. You know, that was the promise whenever Jesus comes and he makes his kind of like coming out party saying that here I am to do ministry. And he says, and he quotes Isaiah and he says that the prophecy is fulfilled today in your hearing, and one of those prophecies is the blind receive sight. Do you know who doesn't care about that prophecy? Everyone who can see. It's irrelevant to them. Do you know who does care about that prophecy? All those that are blind. Do you see how the lack of having something makes you desperate for the purpose or for the person of Jesus there? Those that have their sight, the promise of healing the blind is irrelevant to them. But for those that are blind, the promise of sight commands their attention, their desperation, and ultimately their devotion. None of us want to suffer. None of us choose to suffer. None of us want to go without. None of us wishes calamity upon our lives. But the truth is that this world is full of devils and distractions. And sometimes it isn't until something is taken from us that we find the time, the focus, the desperation to truly see Jesus. In fact, I would argue that is the most scriptural path to knowing Jesus. To find yourself in a place of complete desperation. Now, sometimes that requires an amount of suffering and an amount of dealing with the sin of this world that none of us wants to come face to face with. Sometimes we are given that sight and that insight on our own, and we're able to get there, but the reality is that is how we all come to Jesus, as desperate people. If you do not come to Jesus as a desperate person, you probably are not coming to Jesus at all. Statistically speaking, after the age of 16 years old, very, very few people will make a new profession of faith to follow Jesus that is not accompanied by some significant trial in their lives. A marriage that has failed, a death to someone near to them, a job loss, a medical diagnosis. It is exceptionally rare that someone will see Jesus if it is not accompanied by something like that. It is not the suffering that does the saving, but it is the suffering that brings us to desperate places. Which is why we as a church cannot flinch whenever people say that they are hurting, whenever the outcast shows up at our doors, whenever the desperate come through our doors, or when you're sitting next to them in the workplace. Those are the ones that want to see Jesus. But what about you? I would ask this question. These two stories, you got the disciples, you got the blind man. Which one do you identify with more in these two stories? The disciples or the blind man? Which one more represents your approach to Jesus? When was the last time that you were desperate to see Jesus? I would venture to say that the disciples are most of us in here most of the time. We're on our own schedule, pursuing our own thing, and when God calls us, our response is usually something like now, Jesus? Are you sure about that, Jesus? I didn't sign up for this, Jesus. I didn't plan on this, Jesus. If we respond at all to this, for most of us, Jesus is totally hidden from us. Not because He is hiding, but because we have put up barriers all around us to keep us from Him. Maybe this is the very reason that you go to church. You say, no, I go to church so that I can see Jesus and I can know Jesus. And I would just ask if that's truly the case. Because for so many people, they show up at church because they want that voice inside their head to leave them alone. The guilt and the shame that comes with living in a world full of sin won't stop coming after you. So you go to church, you come here, and you hope that if you do enough of the stuff that you've been told you're supposed to do, the voice will go away. And usually it does, at least for a little while. And so you're coming to church to kind of put a Band-Aid on something so that you don't actually have to deal with the truth of what is in there. Or you go to church because that's what you're supposed to do. You've never been desperate for Jesus because you've kind of always just thought that you had Him. But all you really had was your Christian school lingo, your church do's and don'ts, your list of this is how we do things and this is what we're supposed to do. And you've never had to ask the question, is this worth it? When following Jesus is intended to be something that costs us something, it has to. You've never had to ask the question, is this worth it, whenever you're following Jesus, because you aren't following Him at all. You're just playing a game. The truth is, we make following Jesus a complicated thing in the church, and we do not have to. We have rules and sayings and vocabulary and lists, and there's all kinds of stuff that comes. And the longer you're in church, the longer those things get, the more being a good person looks. And these disciples thought they had kind of learned it, and they kind of knew the path, and they kind of knew where they were heading. They kind of knew where they were going. But this blind man gets it right for us, and he cuts through all of it, and it is so helpful for us this morning. This blind man knows exactly what it means to truly need Jesus, when nothing else and no one else will do. He knows the only person that can heal him, that can make him whole, is Jesus. And I just wonder if for so many of us, Jesus is not, we have not approached Jesus as the only thing that we can come to make us whole, as the desperate blind man here. Instead, we've come to Jesus and we have said, you are one of the things that can make me whole. You are one of the things that can make my life better. You are one of the things. I need you, Jesus. And I need a good bank account. And some retirement would be great. And some good teachers next semester would be awesome. And some of this and a little bit of that. If I can get all of those things, Jesus, then you can be one of those things that make my life better too. This blind man says, I don't need all this other stuff to make my life better. Jesus, I need you. And he was not going to be stopped in his pursuit. He was desperate to get Jesus. So which one looks more like your walk with Jesus? The distracted and blind disciples, or the blind man that could see better than anyone else in these stories? Are you distracted or are you desperate? Are you stuck in neutral or are you in a pursuit that cannot be stopped? Which one do you identify with more? Luke's storytelling here makes it clear. Jesus will hear you if you will call out. Jesus will answer. He is ready to show mercy. He is ready to hear your cry in faith. But I will leave you with this warning. He was only going through Jericho once before he went to Jerusalem. You cannot assume that he will come back through the rows of this church again the same way he is right now. You cannot assume that you will always have the chance to call out to Jesus and say, Son of David, have mercy on me. Do not miss him. Think about if this blind man had said, you know what, there's so many people around, I can't hardly get there. I don't even know where the line is for the entourage coming through town. I could yell, but it's kind of loud. He's probably not going to hear me. You know what? He's headed up to Jerusalem. He's going there for Passover. I'll catch him on the way back. And then he finds out a couple of weeks later, what do you mean Jesus is dead? What do you mean he's not coming back through here? I needed to talk to him so he could heal my eyes. And they're like, I'm sorry, he's not coming back through here. And he would have missed Jesus. Don't miss him this morning. Cry out for his mercy, and you too can see as clearly as this blind man that Jesus is the Messiah, that he has come to set the captives free and to give sight to the blind, and that can be you this morning. And don't get caught up in the whole, like, does he physically still do miracles? Does he do this or do that? Don't get lost in that argument and that debate and how all that works. I'm telling you right now, it is a far more miraculous thing that the eyes of your heart would be open to the truth of who Jesus is, that a dead man would come to life, and the dead man is you in your sin, and that your heart would start beating, and that you would worship and you would follow Jesus just like this man did. But don't walk out of here and just think, I'll catch you on the flip side, Jesus. I'll catch you next time, Jesus. I'll catch you at school, Jesus. I'll catch you next time. I'll catch you whenever life gets harder for me, Jesus. He may not be coming back through again. Don't walk out of here thinking, I'll get to you later, Jesus. This blind man did not do that. He cried out for mercy. Jesus heard him, and Jesus healed him. And he can do the same for you this morning. Let's pray. Father, it is our confession that we are blind to our sin, that we are blind to the reality of of just how great and how awesome Jesus is. Father, help us this morning to have eyes that see. Give us faith this morning. Give us the faith of this blind man, that we would cry out, that there would be nothing that could stop us in our pursuit, that there would be nothing that could stop us in our desperation, that everything would be cast to the side, that we would have full clarity on what it is that we are asking from Jesus. And Father, help us to do that, to cry out to Jesus this morning. And it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. The band's going to sing for us here. I'll be available in the back, and we'll do a prayer time here in just a minute. I'll be available in the back. I would love to be able to pray with you or talk with you this morning. Don't miss. Don't put it off. Cry out to Jesus this morning.